My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm our Executive Director of the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship, and I'm also a professor at Weatherhead. And we are thrilled to welcome back to campus, at least virtually, Mark Armenante, joining us from New York today. And we're thrilled to have Mark on our board, our fellow board member, Joe Mondato, past participant in our speaker series, and great to have Mark in conversation today. As we do with all of our sessions, we're thrilled to have our awesome students lead and moderate. And Cooper Reef, who is a mechanical engineering major, minoring at Weatherhead, and was actually a intern this summer and part of our remote entrepreneurship project program, and was interning with the spin out of the university. So Portfolio Photonics, which is a great startup company that was launched out of Ken Singer's technology. So Cooper was learning about the startup world and helping a case spin out, grow and succeed. So Cooper, was awesome having you in that program, and thank you for moderating today. For anybody that's watching on LinkedIn Live, if you have a question for Mark, just put it in the comments in the stream, and then Doug and I will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure we get it in. If you're here on Zoom, just let Cooper know when you have a question, and we will get to you that way. So with that, welcome Mark, and Cooper, over to you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome if you're on Zoom or LinkedIn Live, or maybe watching this recording after the fact. We are so glad to have you here today. My name is Cooper Reef. I am a third year at Case Western studying mechanical engineering with minors in both entrepreneurial studies and business management. Before I introduce our speaker today, I would like to make you aware of a couple of things. First and foremost, if you have any questions, there's multiple ways to ask them. You can either put them in the chat on Zoom, or if you're on LinkedIn Live, put them in there and they'll get DM'd to me. Or even more encouraged and better for what we have going on here today, feel free to just raise your hand in the participants section and I'll be able to call on you. And we can kind of make this more of an interactive event where we can take it in whatever direction that the hour takes us. In addition to that, I encourage you all to connect on LinkedIn. Events like these are a great way to connect with like-minded people, and you really never know who you're going to come across and the kind of people that you're going to meet at these sorts of events. So if you would like to, you can put your LinkedIn profile, as I believe Professor Goldberg already has, into the chat. I will be sure to do mine at some point during the event. And we can just chat after the event with other people that you meet. So I would like to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Mark Armenante. He is a pioneer in the pharmaceutical systems industry, and he has far, far more accolades than I could possibly cram into an introduction. But just to highlight a few things, he is the founder and former chairman of the board of Veeva Systems. He is the co-founder of Velocity, which, if I understand correctly, has just been finalized an acquisition by Salesforce. So congratulations to that.
Correct, yeah.
Yes. He was also a founder and CEO of Pharma Systems Incorporated, not to mention a 1974 graduate of Case Western studying biology and a member of our CWU Board of Trustees. So we're incredibly lucky to have you on board with the university, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to share some of your wisdom and experiences with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's all Joe Mondato's fault for bashing me over the head into submission to join the board.
Over a 10-year period.
I'm a slow learner.
Yeah.
However long it takes. Well, just to kind of open it up with a little more broad of a question, I think one question that I had, and I believe other people are having as well, is how did Veeva Systems come to be? What exactly is it as a company, and what was the process of creating it and building it to such the industry titan it is today?
Okay, well, what it is a vertical SaaS software company that targets specifically pharmaceutical manufacturers. It's actually, if you look at the progression, I've been doing the same kind of systems for 35 years. when I joined Oracle many, many moons ago, it was in 1986, I think it was, I was given the pharmaceutical industry as my territory. Was running a group of salespeople, and we figured out pretty quickly that the way to sell solutions into an industry is to understand that industry thoroughly and to target and custom craft solutions for them. And so we did that at Oracle with great success. Then moving on to a company called Siebel Systems, I joined them as their head of sales when they formed in 1996. And our strategy there was we took 23 industries and built custom solutions for them. And that was all a client server architecture. But when Siebel, first we did an IPO, then we got sold to Oracle after that. And then it was time to do something completely new. And we said, well, let's do it again. And we started Veeva as a new incarnation of what was then Siebel Systems. And Siebel had been acquired by Oracle. Entrepreneurial companies, when they get acquired, tend to hit the brakes. And Siebel was no longer servicing the industry. And we said, well, we can do a better job. And we formed Veeva. Was originally called Verticals on Demand, because we were going to write software for a bunch of different industries. Things were going, we started, let's do pharma first, because that was the industry we knew best. And pharma is a great marketplace. They're innovators. They got lots of money, and they're geographically compact, mostly in the Northeast, a little bit in Chicago, some biotech in the Bay Area, but it's easy to make sales calls on them. So we said, let's start there. And Veeva just took off. Frankly, we didn't have time to do anything except pharma. We were going so deep into the vertical stack there that we decided to focus in on that. And so we renamed ourselves Veeva Systems. Sounded more like a healthcare company, and we just focused in on that one industry. About 10 years after Veeva was formed, I left the chairmanship and the board, and because we had another idea, which was, what about all these other industries? And that we never got around to doing, and so we formed Velocity, which was the company that would succeed it and take and fulfill our vision. So that's why we did it. We did it with kind of, gosh, people I've been in business with for 30 years. These are people I knew from Oracle. We went through Siebel together. We've sold side by side and worked with one another for a good long time, and we were just comfortable working together. We respected each other. You had to say something once and you knew it would get done. And so my partners were Craig Ramsey, who was my boss at Oracle, and Young Sohn, who's now my wife, but longtime business partner. And the three of us, along with the CEO that we recruited, Peter Gassner, formed the company and grew it to, I don't follow the stock anymore. I think it's well over $4 billion market cap now. And they just had I think a $350 million quarter. So it was, it's gotten big.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a great success story, and we're so glad to hear it from beginning to end. As far as earlier entrepreneurship that you had, most notably at Pharma Systems, how did that prepare you for what you're going to do down the road, especially for people that are in college and thinking about maybe the near future and how that can better them for down the line?
Well, it starts earlier than that. I think my first entrepreneurial job was, mowing lawns and selling myself to my neighbors and my paper route. And then later it was probably the worst job I ever had in my life. Ran an ice cream truck and sold ice cream to kids in the summer. And those things teach you valuable lessons. Think selling ice cream is easy? No. Your clientele is not very sophisticated. You're selling 5 and 10 cents back then, ice cream pops at a time, and those are the early seeds of entrepreneurialism. And then, Pharmaceutical was my first really entrepreneurial thing. I'd gone through a big company called Burroughs, where we sold computer systems, and it felt boring. And a software company called IRI, which I loved, but Pharmaceutical was my first kind of quasi-failure. My first entrepreneurial venture. We didn't go to jail, we didn't go bankrupt, but we didn't make a lot of money. And I think if you look at the 4 years I did it, it was probably all done for minimum wage with the hours I worked and the return I got. But every failure, of course, teaches you a lot. In the ice cream truck, I learned you don't turn your back on young kids in the projects in Patterson because you get knifed in your butt for an ice cream cone. And at Pharmaceutical, I learned that you got to watch your corporate structure because the seed of the company started in the UK, and I kind of took a created the US company as an independent company, but we cross-guaranteed each other's loans, each other's finances. And in the end, I ended up paying for their mistakes over in Europe and drained the company of all its resources, and we made a quick sale, and no one made a lot of money, but boy, that's a great lesson. Again, it was done with friends. It was done with my now wife. She was the CEO of the company that succeeded it called Nomadic Systems. And great lessons. One of the lessons learned there is keep up to date on your payroll taxes, because when the IRS comes to your door, knocks on it, and says, we're here to shut you down, it's a life lesson. They attach your mortgages, they attach your bank accounts, and you don't make those mistakes again. So got to get thick skin too.
Definitely. Yeah, I think failure is a big part of entrepreneurship. If you haven't failed, then you're probably not going to find success in there. So
no doubt.
It looks like we got a question in the chat actually from Mr. Joe Mandata. If you'd like to ask it yourself and unmute, that'd be great.
Mark, given where you're from, given your background,
are you going to hold Jersey against me?
Pardon me?
Are you holding New Jersey against me, Joe?
No, but you pursued a non-traditional career, right? And for coming from a Midwestern school, you took on significant risk. You moved west, again, a non-traditional route. Your education was technical, and you were a sales guy.
Yeah.
That's really, I think it's one of the most valuable positions people can take, but it's just not, people don't do that as a rule, right?
Correct.
I mean, so there was more than just a small amount of entrepreneurial spirit. What caused you to take all these little risks?
So I come from a long line of chemists. My dad was a MIT chemist. My grandfather was a PhD from the University of Rome. And so I was expected to come in and go into my dad's chemical and textile company. which was at that point in time in the late 60s, early 70s, an industry that was dying. But nevertheless, it was kind of expected the oldest son to go take it over, and just didn't feel right to me. And my inspiration came, actually, I was in biology, and we had this one fascinating lab where we had to model the Krebs citric acid cycle or something of an amphibian, and our professor challenged us to do it on a computer, an old Univac back in the days of punched cards, and I wrote this simple program, submitted the deck, and spit back the answers, and I was just captivated. I just said, my gosh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I fell in love with computers, and there was no such thing as software back then, but because we were basically just issuing machine learning instructions back then, machine instructions. So I fell in love with computers, and so I had a long discussion with my dad about how I was going to go and go initially sell computers. I wasn't an electrical engineer. I wasn't allowed to program them. So I went and got a job with this company called Burroughs, long gone now, but they sold computers, and sales job was the only one I could get. And they hired me, and I was successful, and made some money, and did well, and loved it. I love the freedom of kind of being your own businessman. But kind of going back, my dad and my grandfather were both entrepreneurs. They owned, again, textile and chemical companies. And I remember as a kid, some years were great. Sales were good. We got nice Christmas gifts. Took a trip to Europe, to the old country, to see some relatives. And then the next year, it was just awful. I mean, there was no money at all. So I got a lesson in running your own business from them, which was, there are good times, there are bad times. Sometimes there are external factors that they're at work, but to get through it all, you just had to work extremely hard all the time and remain focused. And I've lost track of your question, Joe. I don't know if I answered it or not, but.
The second part of it is sales is definitely a non-traditional career path for technical graduates, but just in general, right?
Yeah.
It's not, people don't wake up and say, I want to be a salesman more than anything else in the world after I graduate with a master's degree in engineering, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's one of the best experiences a business person can have. How would you comment?
Everyone sells. No matter what you're doing, if you're a physician, you're selling the prognosis to your patient. If you're a CFO, you're selling latest financial results, or you want to use a new external consulting firm. No matter what you're doing, you're selling your ideas. And so I think it's the most valuable thing anyone in business can have. I kind of stumbled into it because it was my only way into computers at the time, because I didn't have the technical background to do it, and it was a way to get close. But I remember with going around New England with my dad, going from textile mill to textile mill, trying to sell them the latest chemicals for, and there was something fun about it, making the sale, losing some sales. It was exciting. And actually, in my first computer job working for Burroughs, it was a big corporation. And even though it was still exciting selling, working for a company that big, it felt boring. And so I knew I liked sales. Working for a big company taught me I wanted to work for something small, something that I could mold and create. Something where you're kind of on the seat of your pants 24 hours a day. It keeps you alive, keeps you interested, keeps you in your game. And it's terrifying, but boy, when you win, it's fun. When you lose, it's, you feel like jumping off a bridge sometimes, but if you persevere and win, it's the greatest feeling in the world. And sales is like that. It's you're constantly winning. You're constantly, CEO of Siebel Systems, she came up to me once and she said, "Boy, Mark," because I was running the sales organization, and she said, "Your job, I understand it's interesting, it's fun, it's exciting, but there's nothing cumulative about your job. Every quarter, you're back being a bum because the clock gets reset to zero, and you got to prove yourself all over again." And so it's hard work, but I think it's just really gratifying. And I've seen so many people who are brilliant, who can study something to death, but don't know how to sell their ideas. And those ideas either get lost, or if they're lucky, they find someone who can sell those ideas for them. But if you can learn some sales skills, it's going to take you a lot further, I think, in business than almost any other skill.
Awesome. Yeah, this is some great insight. So for all of the crew students listening on here, it might be a good tip to take a sales class with one of your electives if you can.
Yeah.
So furthermore, to my understanding, you've had some earlier roles, some great roles at both Oracle and Information Resources. So I was just hoping to get a better understanding of what were you doing at these companies and what did you learn from those experiences that helped develop you for later in your career?
Cool. Information Resources was a company I joined. It was called Management Decision Systems at the time. And they had a relational database called Express. It was a brilliant piece of software. There were 3 MIT guys got together and built this software and actually didn't know what to do with it. It was a brilliant piece of software. When I was coming out of Burroughs, there was this new thing called software, and I interviewed there, they hired me, and it was an example of, I had a guy there, Dave Rosenblatt. He was my sales manager, and he was a true mentor. He showed me the ropes. He was tough but kind, very intelligent, and really honed my sales skills. And not so much sales skills, but it really helped me understand how you had to know your customer intrinsically. You had to, everything you did and say and every piece of information you presented had to be couched in the terms and in the way that your customer would understand it. And Dave taught me that. And I did very well there. I eventually became Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing. And we were acquired by Information Resources, they essentially invented scanner data, supermarket scanner data. It was a perfect combination with our software. And we could analyze pricing information, effectiveness of marketing campaigns, couponing, everything had to do with both retail and consumer packaged goods companies. So again, I was focused in on basically one industry there. Did very well, but that company was getting kind of big and hard to deal with. And I got a job offer from a company called Oracle. They were still a small company back then in 1986. And, here I was an executive vice president. I had, a couple hundred people working for me. And they offered me a job as a director and to start a new group at Oracle. And so again, I had to go home, explain to my mom and dad that I wasn't an executive vice president anymore. I was a director and working for this company that no one ever heard from, which is kind of another lesson I've learned along the way. Don't get stuck with titles and positions. I've seen so many people who turned down a great opportunity in a great new industry because they can't maintain their title or the prestige that they thought they had. And it's a grave mistake. You move forward, things change, industries change, move out of the old, move into the new, reestablish yourself. And that was what Oracle did for me. It was a new industry, a new company, and it grew from, I think it was 200 people when I was there to, I don't know how big they are now. But so again, I did well there. I got promoted. We did a lot of deals. We sold to specific industries, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, consumer packaged goods, all the process industries. And we customized solutions for them. And Oracle was a sales machine. A lot of pressure, but you learn from the best salespeople on the planet. And again, these are the people that I went on to do Velocity and Siebel and Veeva with. And they're still all my best friends today because kind of went through the mill, went through the grinder, and learned a lot. So.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess moving on from that, going back a little bit forward in time to Veeva, what was the big challenge in setting up that system? What do you think was if you had one goal to achieve and one mountain to climb, what was that, and what was the approach to conquering it?
In a startup, it's you've got to software startup. You have to have a great product. There's no doubt about that. But then it's revenue. Revenue cures all ills in a startup, and you have to go out and establish yourself early. And once you have a decent product, when you can get out and not be ashamed of, once you get your first couple sales, then customer service kicks in. Your customers have to be insanely happy. And if you can do those three things in that order, your chances of success are huge. And we did that. Those were lessons we had learned before, but we knew we had to have a great development staff. We knew what we were building already because we had built it at Oracle. We had built it at Siebel Systems. We were just building it on a new platform, software as a service, cloud computing. Oracle was mainframe computers and DEC mini computers. Siebel Systems was client-server architecture, and Veeva was cloud. Same application, basically the same product, architected entirely differently, but we knew what we were building from the beginning. We knew who the customers were. We had sold to them all before. I remember the first sales call we won at Veeva was the 4 founders. We went out to J&J, and we walked in, and the CIO there, Jean, I remember her name, she looked at us and she said, "Weren't you here 6 months ago with a different company?" And we said, "Yeah, but this is a really good product." She said, "Well, the last one was pretty good too, and I don't think we're going to be getting rid of it anytime soon." But we said, "Just wait, give us a little time." And I think it took us 4 years to close her, but eventually we replaced all our old systems at all the J&J companies. And so those are the real, I think, keys to the success. At Veeva, we were incredibly capital efficient. The 3 of the 4 founders, we put in 100% of the capital, and which was $4 million. And we then took a venture round of another 4 million, and but never touched it. We never touched. So it was a total capitalization of 8 million, and so it was very capital efficient. And our CEO, I credit him. He said, "I can't help it. I'm Swiss. We don't know how to lose money." So he ran a tight ship. If we had the only headbutting were the three members of the board, Craig, Young, and myself, were the three salespeople. Peter was technical. He was very conservative in terms of expansion. We were very aggressive, and it was a great tension. So we pushed him. He held us back. Somehow we hit exactly the right balance and grew in a way that our burn rate was never negative. So we were very lucky. Or rather, of course, it was negative up front, but I think at the 8-month mark, we were cash positive, which is shocking. So those are kind of the lessons learned there. I think another real lesson I've learned in a lot of these early stage companies is I've heard it expressed in a couple different ways. Back at the IRI MDS days, I worked for a guy called Len Lodish, who was a marketing professor at Wharton. And he said that his philosophy was for anything in marketing or sales or kind of any business decisions was ready, shoot, aim. So, and another one of my bosses, Tom Siebel at Siebel Systems, said it's a core strategy in this company that we're going to have a bias for action. So they both said the same things. Kind of study something, look at it, assess it, but take an action. Do something first. You need to be a first mover. You need to do something, and you can fine tune it later. I've seen a lot of people who study something to death. They never put their plans into action, and they kind of get forgotten because everyone's passing them by. You need a bias for action. You need to make a move, calibrate, recalibrate, and then move on. So a valuable lesson.
Awesome. At this point, if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up if you're on the Zoom. If you are on LinkedIn Live, feel free to type it into the chat and we will get that sent over. But if no one has any questions right now, feel free to keep, Mr. Giordano, please feel free.
So Mark, you described the dynamic of your founder organization, but it doesn't always work that way, right? So when does self-awareness kick in? How do you deal with a less orderly dynamic amongst the founder team? And when do you decide, or if you decide, gee, I think we ought to hire a CEO that's not one of us?
Yeah, it's tell you the truth, Joe, I've been led a charmed life with a lot of these things. With Veeva, Young and Craig and I were smart enough to know that we weren't going to be the CEO of this thing. Everyone we were getting on and in years, and we knew we needed someone younger, and so we were smart enough to hire an extremely smart, super motivated CEO. But like I've invested in other companies, and I've seen companies where the founding CEO doesn't belong in the job. And that self-awareness it's hard. You start something, you own it, you've bled over this, and you want to control it. But at some point, you realize that, if you notice in my career, I went from head of sales. I was president of Pharmaceutical, probably not the best role for me, head of sales. And then I kind of skipped over CEO and went to founder and chairman. And why? I'm just not a good administrator. I know how to sell. I know how to roughly build a company and motivate people and get things done. But I remember I was once on the audit committee of Veeva Systems. I didn't belong there. It was just my eyes glazed over. I had no interest. Sometimes you're not cut out for a role. And, I think I knew I didn't belong as a CEO. I was a good head of sales, and I was a good founder, but not a great CEO. As a chairman, to kind of steer the company, give some ideas, absolutely. But yeah, you have to be aware. You have to set your pride aside. And I've seen companies where they can't, and companies either fail or the investors get involved and you're thrown out of the position. It's not pretty. It goes back to that those people who will hold on to a title and not move to a new, more interesting industry because they'll take a demotion. That's a form of pride and holding on to something that you shouldn't hold on to. And same case. And the solution is you got to put your pride aside, look at things rationally, and do the right thing.
Awesome. I think there's a great lesson about knowing your strengths and acting with that in mind there. Looks like we got a question in the chat from William Whitmore. If you wanted to ask it yourself, feel free to unmute and do so. If not, the question is just biggest failure in the lesson you took away from that. If you wanted to speak on to that.
Again, I think it was Pharma Systems was, if you look at it, we all walked away with a little bit of money, but was it a failure? Absolutely. A lot of lessons, again, corporate structure, your business. I learned corporate structure is important. I learned knowing and working with good business partners is important. And again, my role there as the CEO was probably not the best role for me. And so all valuable lessons and all stems from failures. And, if that kid hadn't stabbed me in the butt on the ice cream truck, who knows, I might be still be selling ice cream. So failures are good.
Yeah. You never know what will happen and turn your direction. So it looks like we have a question from Professor Goldberg himself. So if you wanted to ask that.
Great. No, thanks, Cooper. This is such a great conversation. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today. So let's fast forward to our current world and existence and doing things over Zoom and, travel sort of heavily restricted. And I'm sort of curious from your perspective, the learnings kind of during this time. Folks are doing business very differently now. Selling looks very different because of challenges around travel. I'm sort of curious your reflections on kind of the current state of doing business and when we're able to get back together again, what kind of lessons might we take from this period, do you think, going forward?
I'm reluctant to give too much advice. I feel like a dinosaur these days. And my reaction would be, it's better to sell face-to-face. But I've been surprised at how effective Zoom can be. It's a good substitute. I still think walking to someone's office, looking around an office or their desk and seeing what's there, you see a picture of someone's kids and maybe someone's square dancing or mountain climbing, and you develop a rapport and an insight into them that you just can't get over Zoom. You also don't pick up all the nuances of the body language and the reaction, and there's also a corporate culture going to different corporations where you don't pick up over Zoom. walking into a corporate headquarters, you get a feeling instantly for what kind of organization is this, and how do I customize my product or services for them. And so I don't think it's ever going away. And I think, all right, here's a anecdote, but I don't know how useful it is. But about 6 years ago, I had this friend who's, again, one of these guys who jumps from job to job just looking for a title. He is VP of this, senior VP of that, with no experience. He just found these jobs where he could have a great title. And he finally got this job working for a quasi-pharmaceutical company. And he said, look, would you come meet with me and the CEO of this company and give us some insights? And so we were sitting there at lunch, and he asked me, he said, so how would you go about making, sales calls, increasing sales? Because he was in a sales role. And I says, well, you got to go out, you got to basically get on the phone, call people. You're not going to know who they are, but, and you got to write letters, you got to do this, do that, boom, whole list of kind of these traditional sales tactics. And he said, oh, no, Mark, no, you don't understand. I just make introductions through LinkedIn, and I get sales leads that way. And, I said, well, maybe so, but, I think it's harder than that everyone's doing that. It's easy to do. You have to differentiate yourself. And, he lasted 6 months and became a VP somewhere else. And that company's bankrupt now, but you got to put in the hard work. It's not easy. You got to, and I think the hard work is getting on an airplane and visit your customer and sit across from them and get to know them and understand because the customer will tell you what they want, but it's rarely what they want. They tell you what they think they want, and you have to go and understand number one, what they really need, and not only what they want, but what's the person who's making the decision, his or her boss, what do they want too? Because that's who's buying. And over a Zoom conversation, you don't pick up those nuances.
Yeah, there's definitely an interesting transition going on in the business world today. My dad and I were just talking about this last night. Just who knows what will remain from the COVID-19 world of business after the pandemic is over. What's here to stay and what would revert back to normal. It's definitely an interesting conversation. We got about 5 minutes left before I hand it back over to Professor Goldberg. One question I'd like to ask is, what's one thing you wish you knew or wish you looked into more at your time at Case Western before you moved on with your career? So one thing you wish you really had a better grasp of or paid more attention to or whatnot?
I wish I'd had, oh boy. I was lucky from one perspective. Even though I was studying science, I took the time. I took literature courses. I took my 3 favorite courses at Case were taught by David Orenstein, and he taught me comedies, tragedies, and histories, Shakespeare. And they were the 3 best courses I had at the university. They were fascinating. And what I learned from him was he had the most passion for a subject. So that was a real lesson. I wish I had done that a little bit more. Kind of stepped outside of the bounds and taken a few more of those courses. Because not only are they interesting, but they prepare you for the wider world. Again, if you're selling and you're in someone's office and there's a copy of Shakespeare on his desk, and I think I could still recite Henry the Third Act 3 Scene 1 from memory, and it builds a bond with someone. So the more you learn outside of your strict discipline, the more liberal arts education you have, the more facile you are in the world around you. And so I wish I had kind of gotten out some more. I was, despite the fact that I'm a sales guy, I was pretty quiet and pretty reserved, and never missed a class. I don't think I was ever late for a class. You know, I didn't party too much, and I think those are valuable lessons. I got them later on. I kind of blossomed after school, but maybe fooling around a little bit more could have been a little more instructive for me. I didn't have my first date till I was a junior in college. So how bad is that? So maybe I should have gotten out and done some more social things earlier.
Yeah, I think bouncing off of that question a little bit, do you have a favorite memory from your time at Case Western, whether that was something that ended up serving you down your career path or something that was completely unrelated? Just looking back at your time there.
I do. It was, I went with a friend of mine, Richie Gampert. He just died. He was a Case graduate, of course. And the first guy I knew to come out of the closet, and this was 1972, 1971, super early. And he was always trying to recruit me to his camp and never did, but he took me to this gay club in downtown Cleveland. And oh gosh, what was the name of the group? They sang, their big song was Heroin. There's an album with Andy Warhol did a banana on the, it was just the front cover. We went there and we had a crazy night, and it was a world I had never seen before. And it just left an indelible impression on me. And Rich and I were friends for the rest of his life. And it was a good memory. I was just one of those few times I broke out, and it was in such a spectacular way that it was just crazy. So a lot of fun. Yeah, that was a great memory. And I think those classes from Dr. Ornstein's class were amazing. The passion. I said, there's a guy who loves what he does. And I think that was a lesson. And the other was, I remember my genetics professor, Dr. Lesh Laurie. And I remember we came into the big lecture hall, and she said, all right, you know, there were 200 kids in the audience. And she said, everyone introduce yourselves. And then the next day we come in and sit randomly, and she knew everyone's name. And I just said, wow, that's impressive. So those three things I remember the most.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of memories. Definitely. I look forward to years from now looking back into my experiences here at Case Western as well. Yeah. But to wrap things up, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure everyone that was here and everyone that's going to be watching this in the future really appreciates this, and you taking some time out of your day to share all the experiences that you had and the great career that you've had. And from here, I'd like to toss on over to Professor Goldberg to wrap us up today.
Cool.
Great. Cooper, awesome job. Thanks for moderating. You can see Mark, why the move to having student moderators was the greatest single move I've made in my Veale Institute role. It's been, I mean, our students.
Giving up that CEO role.
Oh, exactly right.